1 billion by 1 billion, okay? With X that has 1 billion unknowns and F that has 1 billion of entries. Even if you use a very optimized coil, like the second order formulation for Maxwell, with continuous finite elements, so that you do not double the number of degrees of freedom, you get a real problem in terms of gigabyte of memories that is used. So if you use a LU solver for these finite elements, you can deal with P1 finite elements with domain that is only some lambda. Here you have 1, 2, 3 lambda times 3 lambda times 3 lambda with P1 element. And with P4 element, you can deal with domain that is only less than 20 lambda. It's impossible to go further. And the cost for this is 1 terabyte of data, 1 terabyte. Okay, this is something that you cannot achieve on your personal laptop. Okay. And so for 1 terabyte, you can only deal with something like 20 lambda. Okay, this is summarized in the following table. Okay, where you have the memory that you can use. Okay, on a laptop, very often you have 32 gigabytes. Okay, and you can deal with 10 lambda. Okay, this use a very small power, 200 watts, and this costs almost nothing. Okay, and the computation is very quick. And you can imagine that you can increase the number of sockets that you use first parallel computation with a small cluster, and that you have already 1 terabyte of memory. But you can go up to 20 lambda. It costs still nothing in terms of power, okay, in terms of euro too, okay, and the computation time is still very small, okay. If I have 16 sockets, it takes me 1 hour of computation. Now, if I decide to use a supercomputer, okay, and I use really a lot of memory, like 320 terabytes, okay, I can deal with domain of this size, okay, but then the power goes completely 1 megawatt, and that's the problem, okay. Nobody wants to put a nuclear power engine behind the supercomputer. And to deal with this type of computation, you should have 5,000 terabytes of memory, okay? And just to pay the RAM that is necessary to have this supercomputer, it is 20 million euros, just to have this 5,000 terabytes of memory, 20 million euros. And the computation times go crazy. So in practice, okay, LU is unbeatable for the small domain where you have less than 1 million degrees of freedom. But when the dimension become larger than 10 million, like 20 million or 10, okay, you have a complete necessity to develop iterative methods to solve this type of problem. Even with the best optimization we know at this time, okay? What is the modern iterative methods? Okay, you have a lot of different iterative methods like multigrid, like other, but the most popular is called the Krylov method. One of them is the GMRS. I recall just a little bit the theory. You would like to inverse the system AX is equal to F, okay? And so you would like to compute X that is A minus 1F. The Keller-Hamilton theorem tells you that the inverse of A is a polynomial of the matrix A, which degree is smaller than the dimension of X, okay? So the idea is to approximate the inverse of A using a power series a truncated power series of AKF. This space, that is the linear space spanned by this vector, is called the Krylov space of dimension n, Kn, okay, which is composed of F, AF, A square F, An minus F. Then I will look to a minimum of this functional over this space. This function, when you square it, it is a convex function. It has a unique minimum when A is invertible, okay? And so you can write the normal equation, which corresponds to least square algorithm, to solve this problem. So I have to find the approximate solution Xn on my Krylov space, which solve this equation. This leads to this leads to a problem, okay, that is not anymore of size 1 billion, but is of size n, with n that is much smaller than the dimension, the complete dimension of X. Okay, so the Krylov methods define an approximation of the solution of this algebraic equation, okay, by defining a reduced basis by reducing the dimension of the space where you look the solution X. Okay, you have results that are due to the spectral theory that has been written, for example, in Saad, which tell you that the error committed by the solution of the Krylov method depends on the spectrum of the matrix A. So lambda is a set of eigenvalues of the matrix A. And to know the quality of this approximation, you have to find the best polynomial that is approximated 1 over lambda over all the values that is on the spectrum of the matrix A. In this expression, we can remark that the function 1 gives you 1 over lambda is regular everywhere except at the point 0, where this function has a singularity. So mainly it's very easy to find a polynomial approximation of a C-infinity function, but it's very hard to find a C-infinity approximation of a singular function close to 0. So the convergence of the GMRS method will be really slowed down by eigenvalues that are close to 0. So GMRS method is very attractive. Why? Because this is a minimal algorithm. So it converges surely. Okay. Secondly, it is very attractive because it does not require that the matrix is symmetric positive definite, like for the conjugated gradient. And also because it is not affected by isolated eigenvalue, except the ones that are close to 0. This is for the theory that is written in every textbook, but what happened really for wave propagation problem. So the idea is to take some methods. Here we have test 2. We have test DG method, discontinuous Galerkin method, over a very small domain, 5 lambda, and a Nedelec finite element over a larger domain, 10 lambda. And what is happening? We are taking the most simple problem that we can imagine. The domain omega is just a cube, okay? Here 0, 5 cube, and here 0, 0, 10, okay? And we consider impedance boundary condition. And so what do we see? We see that the GRM solver is not practically converging. It is converging, but very, 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 very slowly. This is due to the property of the spectrum of the matrix associated to the finite element approximation that has a lot of eigenvalues that are close to 0. We can say also that the conditioning of this matrix is very large. The conditioning of the matrix is the ratio between the largest eigenvalue and the smallest eigenvalue. Okay. So really, we need to do something, and we need to resort to domain decomposition methods to solve this problem of convergence of the GMRS. And we need that this method has a very low memory requirement. Okay. So let me recall you what is a geometric domain decomposition. You start from 0 in the two domains, omega minus and omega plus. You solve at each iteration the Maxwell equation. Okay. On the exterior boundary, you put your impedance boundary condition. And at every step, you have the incoming flux that are given by the outgoing flux from the other cell. So mainly, what do we do is that when a wave goes into this direction, we give it to the other one. So here, the outgoing wave from omega minus is given to omega plus by this condition, okay? And the outgoing wave of omega plus here is given in omega minus by this relation. The normal is this one. Here you have the normal between the two elements. Okay. So, the GMRS method. For finite element or DG method, GMRS are very slowly convergent. Okay. You have some teams that tries to define a global conditioner to increase the speed of convergence. But nowadays, the results are good, but not completely convincing. So it still converges slowly for large computational domain. For boundary element method, GMRS method is working. You have some example, for example, by Francisco Hino, Justine Labat, and Agnès Pujols of CEA that can deal with large domain. But with boundary element method, it's very hard to do some things in heterogeneous domain. So it is only possible to do this in very specific cases. Then you have a lot of work about domain decomposition method. Here you have, for example, a review where you can find plenty of references by Gander. Here you have another modern reference by Colino, Joly, Lecouves, where they have tried to get as fast as possible convergence. And you have also other works that tries to deal with match, which is not trivial, where you have cross point. So here you see you have just one article to deal with cross point. And the reason is that this domain decomposition method are very hard to implement in the context of high performance computing. You have some works that have succeeded to deal with some thousands domains, okay? But really the programming is a nightmare because the formalism that is proposed by domain decomposition method is really hard to put into some numerical code. The alternative that we propose is to use a Treff's iterative method. Why? Treff direct methods are pretty efficient. They are more efficient than finite element approximation. They are less dispersive, and then they can deal with large domain. Okay? But the second property of Treff's direct method that they can be put in a way to become iterative. So this means that they will define a domain decomposition method that is directly written into an algebraic manner. And so trace method will be interpreted as a formalist to define a domain decomposition method. And my third question, is it possible with this method to go up to 1 billion degrees of freedom? And we will see at the end of this talk that this is possible. Trace methods is a continuation of a work from Olivier Cessna and Bruno Desprez that has been published in 1998 that was called ultra-weak variational formulation, UWVF. Okay. Then you have many authors that have continued with this work. I mean, by trace method, I mean trace variational method. The trace methods are from the beginning of the 20th century. But trace variational method is more about the end of the 20th century. Then you have the work at ETH that has tried to give a mathematical background to this trace method, mainly by Hipmeyer, Moyola, and Perugia, where they have worked both with Helmholtz and Maxwell equation. Then you have proof of convergence by Humbert and Monk that is written in this article, where they obtain volumic L2 convergence. So you have a strong theoretical background for these trace methods. And here I wanted to point an article from where I was a co-author with mainly Hélène and Abderrahman. And a lot of the ideas that are contained in this talk come from this former article. And so mainly they are also co-author of this work in some sense, because a lot of their ideas are present also there. So what is a trace method? The idea of a trace method is to consider that the test functions in finite elements are also solution of the Maxwell equation. Not only the solution. So both the solution and the test function will be solution. And to write the virtual work principle, which is some kind of electric derivative in time of the electromagnetic energy, into two ways. By taking into account this equation for the solution, you get the left part, okay? And by taking into account that the test function is also solving this, and you get the right part of this equation. And so you can say that this minus this is 0. And then you get something like rot h dot e prime plus rot e prime dot h, okay? And this is exactly the context of application of the Stokes formula, and which allow to write this expression in terms of a boundary integral. And this boundary integral, in the context of the scattering theory, is called the reciprocity formula. It tells you mainly that the incoming energy is equal to the outgoing energy in the absence of source. So it tells you that the Maxwell equations are conservative, mainly, this reciprocity formula. Okay. When you have this reciprocity formula, the idea is to replace the two traces of the solution. Gamma t is the tangential trace of the solution. So you are on the boundary of an element, and you subtract the normal trace of H. You just keep the tangential trace. Okay. And here, for the solution, and not for the test function that will be still continuous, we will replace this tangential trace by the values that are given by a Riemann solver that is equivalent to a upwind flux strategy. This is what I call this hat here, GTE hat. This is the Riemann traces. The expression of this trace can be equivalently given either by an upwind fluxes or by a Riemann solver or by the approach given by Cessna and Desprez in the article UWVF. And so it makes a strong link between a lot of different theories from the numerical analysis in the context of TREFs. We see that almost everything is equivalent, and all this theory gives different perspective on this problem and allows to put a lot of information coming from the physics into your numerical scheme. So let's see what is this numerical trace in the context of an interior boundary. For example, if we consider the interface between two elements, T and K. Okay, here you have the two elements. Okay, and you would like to define a trace of the solution on this interface between the two elements. Your approximation is discontinuous because you are in the case of a discontinuous Galerkin approximation. So you do not have a unique trace. And the idea is to say that the trace at this interface is a mean between the value at the left and at the right of this interface given by the two outgoing trace of the solution. So you take the outgoing trace coming from the left, given by this expression, and you take the same going from the right, where you change T by K. Okay, and so what do we get? We get an expression like this. Okay. For the boundary, you do the same, but here you have an expression which mixes the outgoing trace coming from an element here and the boundary conditions that define the energy that is coming inside the domain. So when I compute this, what do I obtain? I obtain that the Riemann trace of the solution is a mean. Here you see that you have two coefficients, and you sum these two coefficients, you obtain one. Plus a jump, when you compute the trace of the electric field, you have the two electric fields at the left and at the right, plus a jump of the magnetic field. And you have exactly the same for the magnetic field, a sum of a mean between, this is H here. Sorry. Here it is H. Here it is H. And here you see that with this, here it is. And here it is here. So if you take these two values, you see that when you consider the solution, the trace of E gives you E, and the trace of H gives you H for continuous solution. And at the boundary, you get back the trace of E plus a formula that involves exactly your boundary condition. So the coefficients that were in the last slide were chosen so that the continuity of the solution and the impedance boundary condition is unsure. So I have said that the trace method use solution of the Maxwell equation. What are the simplest solution of the Maxwell equation? It is a plane wave basis. So what is a plane wave? A plane wave in frequency domain is a solution of this form where D is direction of the wave, K is the wave number, X is the position, and P is the polarization. So the electric field E is parallel to P and oscillating, okay? And its magnitude is given by this factor UG, that is the complex, okay? And when you have the electric field, you have also with the same magnitude, the magnetic field that is orthogonal to P and to the direction by computing an exterior product. To have a good approximation, you need to put enough plane wave into your Galerkin space. However, okay, if you put too much basis function into your Galerkin space, your arrow will be really parallel. And so the bases that we'll consider will be really related. It will provoke catastrophic problem for the inversion of the matrix, because the matrix that you will consider will be really badly conditioned and really polluted by rounding error. So N has to be large enough to have a good approximation, but N has to be small enough to have rounding errors. And that's is why this method was not useful before. Okay, so it was mainly impossible to find a good trade-off between these two conditions. So the method was polluted because during the inversion of the matrix, you get too much error. Okay, especially when you have a huge number of degrees of freedom. However, recent work have succeeded to avoid this problem. First, the optimal number of plane wave has been obtained by Moyola, Heitmeyer, and Perugia using the VECUA theory, that is the potential theory. And you have also other work that choose this, the optimal number of plane wave by computing a too large number of plane wave and then doing an algebraic treatment of the obtained system. Mainly we have contributed with this approach with Hélène Abderrahmane, Julien, and myself. Okay, and I will explain this later. You have also some alternatives that exist and that does not use plane wave to compute the solution. The first method is to use evanescence modes to avoid to have some things, to have plane waves that are too much related. And the second one use quasi-Trefs methods to define bases that are also not related. For quasi-Trefs method, we can cite the work of Lise-Marie Imbert, Moyola, and Stoker also. Now I will go through the implementation that has been done by Margot Sirdet. We have taken a strong assumption. We have supposed that our domain is structured. Okay, so mainly we have done like finite differences. Okay, so our domain is just made of cube. So mainly every element in your domain is interacting with himself. It is a black square in my matrix. Then it is interacting with the left and the right neighbor. It is the red block here in my matrix. Then it is interacting with the front and rear neighbor, that is the blue block that you see here. And then with the top and bottom neighbor, okay, that you see here, the bottom, and here the top. So here you have a strong structure of your matrix, and this is what will allow us to go up to 1 billion degrees of freedom. Anyway, let's test the property of the Traves direct solver where we have to invert this matrix. Here, I recall you the curve for the Nedelec, which already does much better than the discontinuous Galerkin method. Okay, that are the curves that are there. And the Traves direct is doing still much better, okay, than the Nedelec, because this is a very optimized method. But anyway, the problem comes back at 30 lambda for 1 terabyte of memory, okay? And so it's not okay. It's completely not okay, because we will never succeed to solve this problem with Traves direct method. Even with Traves direct method, it is not possible to go for 200 lambda, because the LU memory that will be needed will cost a lot, okay? And it is completely crazy to use really a large supercomputer to have this type of application. Okay. So now I will recall the first iterative method that has been proposed by Cessna and Desprez to obtain an iterative method. Cessna and Desprez have proposed to use Jacobi regular singular decomposition of this matrix to obtain a Picard fixed point algorithm, okay? And they have shown that the spectrum of m-1n, that is the propagator of this matrix, is smaller than 1. And so this Picard algorithm is convergent since the spectral radius is smaller than 1. Here you have the diagonal of the matrix and all the other terms for n. And since M is block diagonal, the matrix M is very easy to invert. Okay, this method has a strong theoretical background, but something is happening. When you put it, when you code it, you still get divergence, okay? And when you compute the spectral radius of this matrix, theoretically, you have something that is less than 1, but numerically, due to the rounding error, you get something that is a little bit larger than 1 for random value of the domain, okay? If you change your laptop, you will not have the same result. It is due to the non-exact arithmetic of the computer. And so the idea is to develop a Fortran code that will use a GMRS, okay, solver, plus this algorithm as a preconditioner, and to code everything together into a 3D context. This is okay. When you develop Krylov methods, you have this is the problem that you have at the beginning that define a matrix A and a source term F. You can either use a GMRS method that minimizes this, or a Krylov-Galerkin method that is using this variational formulation, where you will just restrict your Galerkin space to your Krylov space here. Also, you can use a preconditioner, A dièse, that will modify your Krylov space to ensure a faster convergence. And the last point about Krylov methods is to use an orthonormalization procedure to improve the conditioning of these bases and to have a better linear system. I will not speak too much about this, but this is absolutely essential in the method. So what is really wonderful into a Traves method is that the variational formulation associated to the finite element approximation is coercive. This is very surprising because for wave propagation, it is never the case. So what is very surprising is that normally, when you have a wave propagation problem, you have always a matrix that has no sign. And for the trace method, you have a matrix that is positive, that the real part of the eigenvalues are positive. And so you can use this Krylov-Galerkin method that I have explained just before. Okay. When I look to the memory that should be used to compute this Krylov space, I see that in all of these vectors, I have 1 billion degree of freedom. And that mainly to see the memory that I should use to store this data, it is the number of vectors, okay? And so if I take the number of Krylov vectors that is large, the memory that will be used to inverse this matrix will be terrible. So to have an efficient method, I need that N-cre is not too large. And the problem is that the theory of GMRS method says that you have to take N-cre large, okay? Because you have to take a polynomial that is large enough. Okay, this is the theorem that I recall, okay? I would like also to point out that this theory of convergence is not precise at all. There are better estimates that exist, but in practice, they are very hard to use. Okay, so mainly this is the one that I prefer because I clearly see in this estimate that the eigenvalue close to 0 are the ones that are difficult. Okay, so what is the conclusion of this slide? First, I need to move away the eigenvalue close to 0 of the matrix A by modifying the spectrum of the matrix A. And then I need to reduce the memory cost of this Krylov method in all the ways that I can, because this structure can be very large, and I would like to avoid that this number is too large. Okay, that's the first point. And the second point, I would like to use that my mesh is structured to avoid to store all the matrix, because I just need to store the diagonal block and the extra diagonal blocks. Okay, let me compute the memory that will be necessary if I use the complete theory of GMRS and I take N-cre that is equal to the number of degrees of freedom. That is what you are supposed to do due to the Keller-Hamilton theorem. If you do this, N-cre is the end of, and this is the number of terabytes that you have. So you have still more memory that one is doing LU. So N-cre, it is impossible to take it as large as possible. This is really something that should be optimized, the size of the Krylov structure that is maximal. The second point is that the larger is the problem, the larger the memory will be. Okay, more you will have elements, more you will have a high memory cost to store the Krylov. And the more degrees of freedom you will have, more you will have accumulation of rounding errors. Okay, and this point is really crucial. So the idea is to use a restart strategy for the Krylov solver. It means that you will use N-cre that is something like 50 to compute an approximation of the solution, and then to compute a new residual and to restart your GMRS. Okay, so you will always take the number of Krylov that is 10, 50, or 100. And doing this, you will have a very small cost for your Krylov structure. Here, for example, for only 52 million of degrees of freedom, you will have only 40 gigabytes. So it is absolutely crucial to use restart strategy when you use GMRS. The second point is when you have reduced the size of the Krylov structures, is not to store the matrix A. Okay, because when you look really to the cost of storage of the matrix A, is there when you take n Krylov that is 50, you have 7 times more memory byte in A than in the Krylov structure. So the idea is to use matrix-free storage to have a zero cost to compute the matrix A. Okay, if I look more precisely, when I do an assembling of my matrix and I look to a domain of size 200 lambda, this is the number of terabytes that I would like to, that I need to use. This is impossible in the supercomputer, this type of things. So even to build the matrix in a supercomputer will cost too much. In our code, we'll use a matrix-free. What is a matrix-free strategy? We do not store this matrix, okay, with 1 billion degrees of freedom here. We just store the interaction, okay? We store the black block, okay? And we store the blue block, the green block, and the red block. And that's all. When you have all the block, you have all the matrix. You cannot compute the invert, but you can compute the action of the matrix over a vector U. You can always compute AU. And the computation of AU is the only thing that you need to use the GMRS solver. You do not need to invert the matrix. So when I look to the memory cost of a matrix-free strategy, the memory cost is just given by the size of Krylov, because the size of A will be eliminated and replaced by a very small factor, okay, that will be just the storage of the block, okay, and mainly you have killed this factor. So when I look to the memory that is needed to have this method that is working with without a matrix-free or with a matrix-free, you see that you have a huge factor. That's here it is really data that we have, okay, and that's this red line. It's interpolation because it's impossible to do this test case, okay. Here it is really data, and here it is interpolation, okay, extrapolation. Okay. Let's see the evolution of the memory in gigabytes, okay, with respect to the size of the computation domain. Okay. If you take a very large number of Krylov modes, okay, this is the two lines that is here and here. Here you can store the matrix A. The two curves are almost the same. But when the size of the Krylov becomes less and less, okay, it becomes more and more important not to store the matrix A. This is the point between matrix 3. Where is it? With matrix here, and without the matrix here, you see these two lines, okay? You gain so a very large factor because this is you can deal here with a domain of size 120 and here 200, okay? 150 and here 230. And so what is the difference between LU and GMRS? This is mainly in the slope, okay? When you use a LU solver at each time, when it is discontinuous Galerkin, Nedelec, or direct refs LU, you have always a slope that is of order 4 in logarit scale. So the memory increases very quickly. And when you use the GMRES solver, the memory that you use is directly proportional to the number of degrees of freedom. So it does not increase more than the number of freedom. Okay, so this is the reason why you can really deal with larger domain. Okay. So our objective was to deal with 200 lambda, okay, which were giving a number of degrees of freedom, which was 400 million degrees of freedom. But we are able to deal with 300 lambda with more than 1 billion degrees of freedom with our code. So this is what I will show at the end. So I will show you a scheme about what we were doing. With classical method, if we really optimize, we can deal with 21 lambda. Okay. If we use a direct refs method, we can deal with 35 lambda. Okay. If we use tref GMRES method, we can deal with 150 lambda. And if we use trefs GMRES method with matrix free, we can deal with 300 lambda. Okay, this is what she means by practically. Okay. And Nabil, I have just until which time?
Okay, you can. The time is finished, but you can have 5 minutes more if you want. Or...
Okay, no, I will go to. It was
or 10 minutes if you need. Okay, because perhaps we start late.
Okay. So now I will look to the spectrum of my matrix A that I have there. And here I see that my spectrum is really concentrated close to 0. And this is what disturbs the convergence of the matrix. Here you see it in this right point. And here you have a lot of points that is not so disturbing. Okay. Here the idea is to use the preconditioner from Cessna, the Jacobi algorithm from Cessna and Desprez to modify the spectrum of this matrix. So I recall that the Cessna-Desprez decomposition decomposes the matrix in a sum of a block Jacobi matrix and its residual. Okay. So what is exactly a preconditioner? This is something that reproduces the property of the inverse of the matrix A and that improves the spectrum of the matrix A. So you apply an approximation of A-1 to get a matrix that is really that has really much better spectrum properties. Okay, but what we know is that this algorithm, okay, mxn plus I is nxn plus f, will give you an approximation for IDS. Okay, so we'll define the following Jacobi preconditioning. IDS is m-1. Since m is block diagonal, this preconditioner will be computed at no cost. Okay, and also you can, since it is block diagonal, compute. You can define it symmetrically to improve the property of the matrix. This is what is happening after this preconditioning. When you multiply the matrix A by m-1, what is happening to the eigenvalue? You have less eigenvalues close to 0, and the shape of this eigenvalue becomes a circle. And that's the work mainly of Cessna and Desprez, that is just reinterpreted. So I will speak a little bit about an implementation of the work that we made with Abderrahman about basis reduction in this context of Maxwell problem. The idea is to select the good plane wave. Okay, the blocks that are involved in the Jacobi decomposition are positive definite matrices. Okay, and so they can be diagonalized, and they correspond to a bilinear form in which some plane wave has an importance and some other has not. But it's not so easy. It is not a plane wave that is important and another one that has no importance, but there are combination of plane waves that are that has good property and some that are just rounding error. Okay, so the idea is to perform a diagonalization or a SVD of this matrix to select only the plane wave, the combination of plane wave that that have energy inside. Okay, so you diagonal this matrix M, you compute the eigenvalue, you keep only the eigenvalues that are the largest. Okay, this defines you a restriction of this lambda. You truncate also the eigenvalue matrices here at the left and at the right. And you use this new basis that is defined by your new eigenvector to reduce the matrix A. This is mainly to define a reduced Galerkin basis that is made of the eigenvector of your matrix A that are associated to the maximal of energy. This is a procedure that is very often done in statistics that correspond to analyse en composantes principales. Main component analysis, okay, in which we keep only the information that is important relative to our problem. Sorry, my English in statistics is very bad. And my accent also is very French. Okay. When you do this, and this is what we observe, okay, we see that the spectrum, you have still less eigenvalue close to 0. You have only 3 here. And all the others are much more far away from the origin. And so you will have also a better convergence property. Okay. Okay. By selecting the good wave, we will reduce the dimension of the Galerkin space. Okay. For example, if we consider at the beginning 196 plane wave, and we select the eigenvalues that are more than 10 minus 5 for an element that is 1/4 of wavelength, we only keep 48 wavelengths. So we have divided our size of matrix by a factor 4. If I look to the eigenvalue here, this is for different size of my elements, I see that all this one is just the rounding error of the computer. And this is very important not to keep them because they just introduce noise and they just destroy your computation. That's the only thing that they are doing. Here you are less than 10 minus 12, so it is clear that this is noise. Okay, and mainly we truncate this. And I would like to show you a little bit of what is going on when you truncate. This is when you do not truncate. Okay. And you ensure that by some tricks that the things is still convergent. Okay, this is when I increase epsilon, you don't see any difference. So you have really reduced the size of your matrix system and you do not lose anything. Okay, here I reduce 10 minus 5. Okay, so I have divided by 4 my number of unknowns. So it's a huge impact. Huh? And this here, I start to reduce. Here, I keep my solution, but here I see that my approximation is not sharp anymore. And here, I have taken epsilon, which is 1%. Okay. And here, I have not enough information to compute correctly the solution. So a good trade-off is between these two numbers. Okay. 10 minus 5 will be a good trade-off. Okay. And if I look to the computation time, since I reduce the number of degrees of freedom, that's here, I have really reduced the computation time from 4,000 250. Okay, and I have also reduced from a factor 4 the memory. This is also other example where I reduce. Here, this is my reference solution with a scattered here inside. This is where I reduce. Here, I keep really the property of the matrix, the property of the solution. Here, you see that this compression has almost no effect on the qualitative property of the solution. And if I reduce too much, I still keep a little bit the solution, but this is really not precise. You don't see everything. Okay, I will skip this global preconditioner. And to keep a little bit time for question, perhaps, I will speak about a final numerical case. That's about what is that has this size, which is 24 lambda times 61 lambda times 154 lambda. Okay. Here you can think that this is really a boat, but that's absolutely not a boat. That's just a Lego of a boat. Okay. So my boat is made of hexaedra. And so the computation is questionable because you do not have the correct effect of the edges. So the code is still needs a lot of improvement to work in complete for real test case. It's just a Lego. Okay. That's my number of elements. Okay. And that's my number of degrees of freedom, 3/4 of a billion of degrees of freedom. You remember I was saying that you need 1,000 of terabytes, and we have just 400 of gigabytes. So it's just parallel computing and not really high performance computing. And the computation time is really reasonable. Okay, and that's made on one CPU. This is one CPU with a huge memory. That's a special CPU that we have at Onera. Okay. Here you see that's a plane wave that is coming from there and that is making a shadow on the bottom of the boat. And here you see a very complex reflection on the top of the boat. So qualitatively, the solution is good, but I cannot say anything. So here you see the shadow behind this obstacle here. Okay. So, and that's my conclusion. So we are able to do, no, the parenthesis is not here, 300 lambda of cube, okay? And for maximally 1.6 billion degrees of freedom for the last test case. And if you are interested by some article, you can read this. And also soon the PhD thesis of Margot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sébastien. Is there some questions? Is there some questions? Oui.
I do have a question, actually.
Okay. Go on.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So my question is more related to the variational formulation that you're working with. So you said that you work with ultra-weak formulations. It's not necessary to go back to the slides. I mean, if so, my question is: so if you when you discretize the ultra-weak formulation of the equation, the convergence, in what sense do we get convergence?
You get convergence with respect to. Okay, that's the work from Monk. Okay.
Okay.
And from Cesna-Desprez. So I will explain everything. When you have a DG method, first you have two norms, a strong norm and a weak norm. Okay. The strong norm about this DG method is a norm that is involving the jump of the solution and also the impedance impedance boundary condition expressed in L2 norm on the exterior boundary. Okay, that's the weakest norm that we call the DG norm. Okay, then you have a strongest norm that is called the ultra weak variational formulation norm. Okay, that involves the sum over all the elements of the L2 norm of the tangential trace of the electric field squared plus h squared, the tangential trace of the magnetic field squared over all the boundary of all the elements. So it's a sum of over 1 million of elements, okay, of the L2 norm of the tangential trace of the electromagnetic fields, okay? So Cessna and Desprez, they have proved that the UWVF converge for these two norms, okay? And this convergence is given by a consistency result given by the plane wave. Then you have Ipmayer and Moyola that I've obtained with Vekua theory estimate for this consistency result. Okay, and then you have Monk and Humbert that has proved that when you have convergence in these two DG norms, okay, you have also convergence in the L2 volumic norm. Okay, so at the end,
so you do have strong convergence.
Yes, and that's the work from Monk and Humbert. And these estimates are absolutely not trivial. This is a very hard application of an Obernitzsche result.
Okay, and is it in one of these references that we see here?
I think that's this one, yeah. Humbert, Peter Monk. This one.
Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, that concludes my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another question? Sebastian, then if I understand, the Trefet's method is a way to is a method that allows to obtain a good preconditioner in order to solve Maxwell equations by an iterative method.
Yeah, exactly. The first thing is that when you have a classical method, you get a matrix A that is not positive. Okay. And so it's very hard to deal with GMRS method. Tref method is positive. That's the first point.
Okay.
The second point is that the conditioning number of this Tref method is much better than the conditioning number of classical methods.
Okay. Also for the unconditioned system.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because when you use the classical method, you discretize the Laplacian, okay?
Okay.
And the Laplacian is 1 over h squared.
Okay.
And when you discretize the Tref method, you discretize the impedance operator, which is somehow an operator between h minus 1/2 and h 1/2. So you get just 1 over h factor. That's the first improvement. And this we have seen this with Abderrahman very clearly for the Laplacian, that the conditioning number of the Tref method is always much better than the conditioning of the classical method. And that's the first point that will make it, without doing anything, a GMRS solver for a Tref method. And the third point is that a Tref method, when you write it in a UWVF form, comes directly with a preconditioner. That is trivial. That has been proposed with Cessna Desprez. So with these 3 points, positivity, good conditioning, and easy preconditioner, you get a good iterative method.
Okay. There is something that I'm not sure I understand. For the free matrix strategy, you say that we don't need to have the coefficients of the we don't need the matrix, but we need just a function that make the multiplication by the matrix. But
exactly.
this function, we need the coefficients of the matrix. Then it means that you load just the coefficient that are not 0 on your matrix, or
no
other thing.
Okay. For example, you have 50 million lines of block. Okay.
Okay.
But in all these lines, you have always the same green matrix, the same blue matrix, the same red matrix, the same black matrix. Okay.
Okay.
In all this line.
Then there's a periodicity in the matrix.
Exactly. And so you do not store the clones, because if you use a sparse solver, you will store the non-zero. You will store the I, the J, and the AJ. And so you will store clones of clones of clones, tons of clones.
Okay.
That's this. And the idea that was behind, I am personally convinced that finite element methods are doing much better than finite differences method. Okay. But when you look to the performance of finite differences in the article, you see always that they do better than finite differences in terms of high performance computing. And we can think that this is due to finite difference. This is not the case. This is due to the structure of the mesh that is periodic.
Okay.
And so the idea was to obtain much better results than finite differences just by taking into account this periodic structure of the mesh.
Okay, thank you. It's clear. Is there other questions? Okay, if no questions, thank you, Sébastien, for this very clear talk and very interesting subject. And okay, we have.
Thank you, Nabil,
again.
a lot.
Okay, thank you very much for accepting.
Don't hesitate to send me the link of the conference that you are doing. I will also forward it to the group Makutu at each time.
Okay, I will send the link. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sébastien. There's someone who is.
Okay. Thank you, Sébastien.
Merci à tous.
Salut, Nabil.
À bientôt. Je te recontacte.
Ok, ciao.
À bientôt.